Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Italeri's 1/48 scale C-130J C5. Took it upon myself to get some aftermarket for this one, so let's get started. I hope you enjoy. So construction begins in the nose wheel well actually. So here you can see me cementing a front bulkhead on. This is going to act as the front bulkhead obviously for the nose wheel well. Here you can see me putting the floor of the nose wheel well in. Some fairly decent detail here. Overall, the wheel wells don't have a lot of detail in this kit, but on the contrary, the kit is absolutely massive, so realistically you're not going to be flipping it over to look in the wheel wells that much. Just a quick note that I wanted to make as well, I took it upon myself to get some aftermarket for this kit because we're going to be making it as a CC-130H. So I got a Bren gun engine set for the E and the H, and I also got a Belcher Bits C-130H decal set. Comes with decals for the C-130E, H, and J30. So lots of options there for you. I'm obviously using the ones for the C-130H. But anyway, with that being said, let's catch up with the build. So here you can see me doing my usual black basing technique on one of the walls of the nose wheel well. There you could see in the middle of the wheel well wall there, you could see a little bit of a kind of a pin, not really a pin, but an area where a pin goes into. That is for the actual nose landing gear to slide into that, and it allows the landing gear to be extended or lowered. I utilize this as a bit of structural support, but I also use it that way I can keep the landing gear retracted while painting, and then I can extend it and glue it into place after, so you'll see that later in the build. It's quite handy. Here you can see now that the black basing is all done and we can go back over with our uniform coating. So here you can see me painting up that sidewall that we had left off originally. Just going to go over that with our uniform coating. Here is the uniform coating all sprayed up now. Just leaves the areas around those little panel lines there a bit darker. One thing to note here as well is this kit does not feature recessed panel lines. They're all raised. So the kind of, I guess, very little amount of weathering that I'm going to do on this kit is just going to be some oil work to provide some streaking. And obviously a panel line wash won't be used because I don't have recessed panel lines to put it in. But on the whole, anyway, Canadian C-130s aren't very dirty. They're kept in fairly good, clean condition. So, you know, it's not the end of the world. Catching up with the build here now, here you can see me picking out some of the piping with the silver. This is the, I believe it's a Vallejo white aluminum. Very good color, really nice to brush paint with. And then we're going to pick out some of the other pipes with some yellow and red. Here you can see me using the Vallejo Model Air yellow. Absolutely love the Model Air range, in case you guys haven't noticed from the previous videos on the channel, but I pretty much use it religiously. It's fantastic. It's airbrush ready right out of the bottle. It's the perfect consistency, but it can also be brush painted. They're fantastic paints. But anyway, here you can see me picking out the other pipe in the red. Now we're going to be giving the wheel wells a linear wash. This is just a dark black wash that we're going to put into all the recesses here, I guess for lack of a better word, or little areas that it'll get stuck in. And that will just bring out some of the detail that does exist here. At this point now the wash has been removed, and here you can see me cementing the nose wheel strut in place. This is what I was talking about earlier with those little pins that hold it in place so it can be raised or lowered. I keep it in the raised position while I'm building the kit, and then when it comes time to cement the landing gear, the main landing gear in place, I will pop it in the open position, or the extended position, sorry, and I'll pop a little bit of glue there where my index finger is to hold it in place like that. And it's a pretty neat little feature there if you wanted to allow it to be retracted, but the main landing gear can't be retracted, so I don't really know why you'd want to do that, but that option is there if you would want to do that for some reason. So here you can see me working on the cockpit seats, and now I'm putting in some different structural supports and things like that. These little boxes here go in between the rudder pedals. At this point in the build now, it's basically just getting everything ready for primer. Like here you can see me cementing the rudder pedals in place. Anything really that can go in the cockpit without needing primer prior to being cemented is going to go in at this stage, just so that we can get pretty much everything done at once. So here you can see all the parts now that are ready for primer. The reason you're just seeing these now for the first time is because most of these just came off the sprue without any real assembly. And here you can see me spraying down the cockpit color. I think this is a Ocean Gray, the Vallejo Model Air range, Ocean Gray. You'll notice there that the center console and some of the boxes at the rear of the cockpit are gray. That's because originally I had sprayed the cockpit, or I had left the cockpit floor black and then sprayed those parts in a light gray, but I realized that that wasn't very accurate, so I just went back and sprayed it like this and it looked a lot better. Here I am now detail painting some of the panels on the center console, just hitting this with a Vallejo flat black. This is the model color flat black, so it's a little bit thicker. It's meant for brush painting. Just getting all this painted up here now. So pretty much all of the other components in the cockpit are going to follow this same ideology of just the brush painting with the black. So here you can see the circuit breaker panels have been painted up. And here you can see the forward instrument panel was painted up. It's good to note that the kit is a C-130J C5, so it's a very modern, well, not very, it's a fairly modern version of the C-130. And obviously Canada doesn't use them. We use the J30, which is the longer version. So the kit does come with instrument panels for the modern C-130s and the older C-130s with the steam gauge cockpit, so I decided to use the older instrument panel just for a little bit of accuracy. But anyway, apologies for that little rant there. But catching up with the build, here you can see me painting up the fuselage. This is being painted up in that same ocean gray that was used in the cockpit. It's a fantastic color. I absolutely love this gray color. Ocean gray colors always look great. I find the Vallejo Model Air Ocean Gray is most accurate to Canadian C-130 interiors, just based off of the reference pictures that I've seen. There's very few reference pictures of Canadian C-130 interiors. Not quite sure why. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's very few reference pictures of Canadian C-130H interiors. You see a lot of the J pictures, but it's pretty hard to come across the H interior, so for the very few pictures that I did find, it seemed that the ocean gray color was the most accurate. On screen now you can see me painting up some padded areas for the cabin. I believe in real life you can hang seats off these for paratroopers and then they can fold up for transporting cargo and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I believe. So just painting that up with a USAF light gray. This is a very, very straightforward process. No special painting techniques going on here, just trying to get a uniform coating of the paint, and then we'll bring it out later with washes and things like that. Now I'm painting up a section of padding that goes in the ceiling of the cargo bay, and with that being finished up, that concludes all of the painting for the cargo bay as of right now. So what you see me doing on screen now is cementing the control yoke to its actual column. Here you can see all of the different things that were detail painted. I painted these up off screen just because I really wanted to focus on getting a kind of uniform and good looking bit of detail painting there, because my detail painting is still questionable at best. It's not bad, but it definitely could be better, and having a camera in my face stopped me from being able to detail paint comfortably. So I didn't record a lot of that. If you'd like to see a little more detail painting in depth, go watch my Tamiya F4F video. I go into it a little bit more there. But yeah, that's the reason I didn't record it, was just because I really wanted to focus on making the cockpit look good. And with that being finished up, now we can start bringing some of the different cockpit components together. Here you can see me cementing the instrument panel in place, and here I'm cementing those two little sidewall sections of the cargo bay in place. These are pretty straightforward, but the locating pins aren't very good, as in the actual hole that they're supposed to slide into is bigger than the locating pins themselves, so it kind of has a little bit of give and a little bit of play to it. So if you are following along with this build, if you were lucky enough to find it, just make sure that you're being careful in this part of the build. The reason I say if you're lucky enough to find it is because Italeri doesn't make this kit anymore. It was incredibly hard to come by, and I was very lucky to get it for the price that I did, with all the aftermarket on top of that as well. It was a good chunk of money, but overall I'm very, very happy with how the kit came out, and this is definitely the centerpiece of my collection now, so that's all that matters in my book. Moving back on to a little more detail painting now. Here you can see me detail painting up a fire extinguisher that goes into the, I believe this side points into the cargo bay and the other side points into the cockpit. This is just a forward bulkhead. This also helps with structural support. I'm just going to go ahead and say right now, the fuselage halves joining together weren't very good. And that's kind of what I was most worried about going into this kit was, oh man, like how well are the fuselage halves going to fit together? And as said about 10 seconds ago, it wasn't very good because there was just so much going on in the interior that it kind of pushed the two fuselage halves out, so quite a bit of putty and filler was needed to sort it out, but we did get there in the end and it came out looking pretty good. Here I'm cementing some piping and different things like that to the roof of the cargo bay. It's a pretty straightforward process. A little bit of super glue is needed to hold it in place. Pretty much the entire interior was cemented together, or I guess glued together with super glue, just because they're such big parts that I didn't want to risk having them break on me, so super glue just kind of gave me that little bit of extra security. Here I am cementing the crew access ladder in place. This helps them climb up into the cockpit when they're getting in and out of the aircraft. You can see it's a little bit fiddly to get in place here, but I do get it eventually. Just takes a little bit of time and patience. You can see there by my thumb too, the circuit breaker panels. Those sadly ended up popping off when I was trying to cement the two fuselage halves together. So unfortunately I did have to end up taking the canopy glass off, or taking the cockpit glass off, sorry, and removing them. So unfortunately those two parts aren't in the cockpit in the final product of the build, but at the end of the day, the cockpit glass and the cockpit windows are so small, you can't really see that well into the cockpit anyway, so you can't really notice that they're gone. So it's not the end of the world. Definitely a bit of a shame, but could be much, much worse. So here I am now cementing the forward half of the fuselage to the rear half of the fuselage with a bit of super glue. That's a pretty straightforward process again. Just holding it in place until it dries. There you can see all the windows were masked off. Didn't record that just because, you know, it's masking. It's nothing really that interesting. Coming up here now in a second, you'll notice that the back half of the fuselage toward the ramp was painted in a interior gray-green color. This is like the British color that so many of the World War II aircraft used by the British had. I unfortunately lost the footage of me painting that up, but it was my usual black basing technique that was used, and then everything else was just picked out with a wash. So it's pretty simple. But I do apologize for losing that footage. But anyway, won't let that stop us. Gonna push forward with the build again now. Here you can see me cementing the flight surfaces in place. Pretty basic assembly, just the top half and the bottom half. Most manufacturers do that kind of assembly for wings these days. And here you can see them getting cemented in place with some super glue. And with that being done, we can now start painting this beast. So what I'm going to be doing first is obviously priming the aircraft. This is primed in a flat black primer. And now for the first color, I'm going to be using Vallejo's Model Air Insignia White. And this is going to be pre-shaded into all of the panels. Because the aircraft has raised panel lines, I wanted to accentuate them as much as possible because a wash wasn't, you know, a viable option. So I'm using a very, very light color to make those sections of panel line look as dark as physically possible. And I think you'll agree with me that on the end of the build it came out pretty good. It got drowned out just that little bit, but overall it was pretty good. So now we can get started on the main paintwork. Here you can see me spraying up a uniform coating of an ocean gray. It's the Vallejo Model Air Ocean Gray. Fantastic color. Just getting a uniform coating of that all over the fuselage, and then we'll break it up later with different tones and things like that. Here on screen now, you can see me spraying up the belly. This is getting sprayed up, sorry, in a medium sea gray, as Canadian C-130 bellies and some American C-130s have a different colored belly compared to the rest of the aircraft. So yeah, just spraying this up with the medium sea gray, following the same black basing technique that I did on the main fuselage. But instead of using an Insignia White, I'm actually using the gray color. I apologize for the out of focus shot here and the fact that my hand is basically in front of the screen. The model is absolutely huge and it's very difficult to get everything in framing properly, so hope you can forgive me for that. But so just continuing on with the black basing technique, and then as you'll see here now in a second, I just blend it all back across, and then we can go ahead and take the tape off. I'm very, very happy with how the color came out on the bottom of the aircraft. The masking tape came off perfectly and left some nice crisp lines, and the color itself looks fantastic. So yeah, this was a very, very good part of the build here. And with that being done, now we can go ahead and mask off some different components that are going to be sprayed in different colors. Here you can see I masked off the rudder. The rudder is going to get sprayed in that same medium sea gray. And then in a couple seconds you'll see that there's a panel on the side of the aircraft that gets sprayed in the same medium sea gray as well. Here I am now just blending in that black basing technique. It's a pretty straightforward process. Every single time I paint with black basing, it's blended in the exact same way. And here now, you can see that I have masked off that panel on the side of the aircraft. Not every Canadian C-130 features this panel in a different color, but I figured, you know, it's nice to break up the paint a little bit, so I decided I'd mask it off, and it's just sprayed in a uniform coating. Moving on here, now I'm spraying up the radome in a different color. This was a medium sea gray mixed with a few drops of smoke black, just to give me a bit of a darker medium sea gray, more of a dark sea gray kind of color. But that's just going to get sprayed up in uniform coating as well. So here you can see that I've masked off the propeller warning stripe on the fuselage. I decided I would mask this off and paint it instead of using the decal, because really thin decals that are used to create lines really don't go down too well for me. I don't know why, I just haven't found a set method that works for them. So I decided that I'd mask it off, and where it's such a big model, it's not a big deal to mask off anyway. So here you can see me spraying it in an insignia white. This turned out to be a little bit too light of a color, so I ended up remasking it and painting it in a USAF light gray, and it turned out way better. Here now I've masked off the APU exhaust, and I'm going to be painting this up in Vallejo's white aluminum, just a uniform coating, and then that little circle in the middle where the actual APU exhaust pipe is, that'll just get painted in a flat black. Now we can cement the main landing gear struts in place. I decided to cement the landing gear in place before decals and everything, just that the aircraft had something to sit on. So these are just getting super glued in place, and they are very, very strong, nice and beefy, so there's no worry about them collapsing with the pretty heavy weight of this aircraft. There's a lot of plastic in this model, so I was a little bit worried, but they held perfectly. Now I'm gluing the cargo bay doors in the open position. The top one folds up into the fuselage, and the bottom one folds out as a ramp so that you can load cargo onto it. So this is just held in place with a little bit of super glue. And you know, it's a pretty straightforward process again. I can now get out the first bit of aftermarket, that being the Bren-Gun 1/48 scale C-130E and H engine nacelle set. This is resin, so very, very detailed. One thing to note here too is that these have recessed panel lines, so I didn't put a wash on them, just because if I put a wash on the engines and I couldn't put a wash on the rest of the aircraft, it would look quite weird. So, you know, I didn't put a wash on that for that reason. But here you can see the front of the nacelle going into the back of the nacelle. This is done 4 times, of course, because the C-130 has 4 engines. And I can now have a look at the propeller blades. There is 16 of these. Felt like there was about 800. There was there was so much masking that had to be done. It was honestly a nightmare. But at the end of the build, I think you'll agree with me that they came out looking pretty darn good. So, I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. A lot of work, but it definitely paid off in the end. And one thing to note as well is this is resin, so if you are following along with this kit and you're using the resin, please be careful. Resin dust is very, very harmful to your lungs. You do not want to breathe that stuff in, so please be careful. After the engines get finished up, the wings can be cemented in place. Originally I wasn't going to glue these in place, but just because of the sheer amount of weight that they had, I didn't just trust the thin plastic wing spar to hold them in place. So I ended up gluing them in with a bit of super glue, and they held perfectly fine, so no complaints there. The decals were put on as well. They went down fantastic. I will definitely be using more Belcher Bits decals in the future. They did have a bit of silvering, as you can see there on the ARC, but I think that was down to me more than anything because I didn't use a lot of decal fixer, so, you know, not going to blame the manufacturer for that. I think that was just down to me not being as thorough as I should have been. But anyway, we shall move on. Here you can see the other wing going in place, and after that the engines can get put in place. They have to be super glued in place. Obviously cement won't work on resin, but this can be repeated 3 more times, and then we can move on to some weathering. The only weathering that's going to get done on the kit, is going to be a little bit of oil streaking. I'm not going to go too in depth with it here. If you want to see kind of how my process works for doing oil streaking, go check out my Revell FA18 Super Hornet video. I go very, very in depth with it there. That was kind of the main weathering technique that I used. for that aircraft. So if you'd like to learn how I do my streaking and things like that, go check out that video because I go a lot more in depth with it there. But just going to wipe all that oil off now to leave some nice streaks. When I looked at reference pictures of Canadian C-130Hs, I noticed that the engines had a lot of streaking around this side here, so I decided to recreate that on the model. Just a note for you guys as well, I'm using a burnt umber oil. It's the Winsor Newton burnt umber. It might be a dark umber actually. I believe it's a dark umber, I apologize. It's a fantastic color, especially on schemes with a little bit lighter of a paint. It pops and really draws your eyes to it, so it's fantastic. I love it. Moving my attention to the rear of the aircraft now and doing some more streaking. I pulled the streaking down on the sides of the fuselage instead of in the direction of airflow to say that maybe the water that runs off the aircraft when it's on the ground pulls that dirt down instead of like the wind and the air pulling it backwards over the wings. So that's my reasoning for pulling it down instead of back. At this point now, the propellers can be secured in place, the masking tape can be removed, the antenna can be secured onto the aircraft, and that finishes up this build. Thank you very, very much for watching. If you've stuck around this far into the video, thank you. I greatly appreciate it. This kit was an absolute joy to put together. It was fantastic from start to finish, and it's such a friggin' big aircraft, man. Like it's huge. I absolutely love it. So I really hope that you enjoyed the video as much as I did putting it together. Once again, if you've stuck around this far into the video, thank you very, very much for watching. Enjoy the final photos, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye-bye.